Chapter 5. Vittoria sat on the ground in her home and stared at the moonbeams that spilled onto the floor. If she listened very, very hard, she swore she could hear the churn of the ocean. Aniko's head lay in her lap, his chest steady with the rhythmic rise and fall of his breaths. She ran her fingers through his hair, comforted by the movement. Memories of Anton slipped through her aching mind. Calm, clear nights like tonight made her miss him, long for his steady confidence and quick smile. He'd been their saving grace when they fled the farms. Things seemed to come so easily to him. This house, Mare's job at the Morettis, which he'd found for her when they were days away from starving. Thoughts of Anton led to Mateo, and her mind shifted again. La Salvatorra, Mateo, High Priestess. She couldn't stop thinking about Mateo and his outrageous request. No matter the order she tried, she couldn't puzzle the pieces of his wild declaration together, not in a satisfactory way that made any sense. Mare sat next to her, wearing a deep frown. Mare shared Vittoria's same heart-shaped face and too slender body. Wrinkles around her eyes and streaks of gray in her raven-black hair aged her, but she still had grace. Food stained the front of her apron, which she hadn't taken off. Her lips moved silently, nightly prayers to the givers. "High Priestess," Mare whispered all of a sudden. "It doesn't seem real." Vittoria just shook her head. Her homespun dress lay limp against her legs, stained gray from all the washings. She stared at her knobby knees. Could she imagine her dress full like the landowners? Heavy? Layered until it was hardly wearable? She'd laundered landowner dresses for years now, secretly despised their waste of massive amounts of material. As High Priestess, she'd have to wear them, surely. Wouldn't she? Would Mateo make his own rules? What roles or customs would survive? "And if he dies," Mare asked, voice pinched, "what would happen to you if Mateo died?" "Then I die?" Vittoria shrugged. "He mentioned someone who could save us before that happened, but..." Mare scowled. "We never wait for other witches to save us, do we? No, you'd have to be ready with a plan yourself. What if there's retribution against the family? The landowners may find us, hold us hostage. Aniko would be a prize to bargain with." Unfortunately, the wild idea wasn't outside the realm of possibility. Not these days. The thought of it sickened her. "I don't know, Mare." From a nearby roof, someone bellowed out threats against the high priest. A rebel recruitment meeting, no doubt. They'd scuttle soon, when guardians caught a whiff and came on patrol to investigate. Though they came so rarely out here, they might not even show up. Vittoria wondered where Mateo was, then forced the thought away. Mare reached up to close the window, but Vittoria stopped her. The stuffy room smelled like unwashed little boy, and felt too close and confining. She longed for open, quiet spaces. A beach, perhaps. "A few more minutes of air, just until we sleep." Mare relented with a nod. "Food for the rest of your life," Vittoria said a minute later. Her gaze lingered on Aniko as she brushed a lock of hair out of his face. "Safety for Aniko, medicine for Pear. You could quit the Moretti house and cook for only your family." Mare smiled. "A dream indeed." "Not a dream, a reality, isn't it? Isn't that what Mateo offers? A better life for all of you. How could I turn that down? It would be so selfish. Maybe Sonara would come home to stay. Aniko would know his real Mare." "At what cost?" Mare raised her eyebrows. "You being High Priestess, it's a prison, Tori, an elegant, beautiful cage. You'll be the object of ridicule of the landowners. They'll hate you, maybe try to kill you. The workers would say you sold out to the landowners for a better life. There would be no respect from either side. Is food worth freedom?" Vittoria reached over and grabbed her arm. "Yes," she whispered with tears in her eyes, "if it guarantees food and health for my family." Mare's nostrils flared. "It is too much," she whispered and waved her hand. "I have lost my son. I cannot lose my daughter." "So you will lose Aniko to starvation. Pear to infection. Is one life more important than another?" Mare opened her mouth to reply, but closed it again. Vittoria swallowed a lump in her throat. Pear burst into a coughing fit, and Mare stood and crossed the room. With a sweet murmur, she helped him sit up to have a drink. Vittoria watched them, grateful for a break from Mare's intense emotional waves. Watching Mare and Pear together swept in a fresh round of concerns. Mateo wanted them to handfast. They'd spend the rest of their lives together. Would she and Mateo share the same affection as her parents if they handfasted? Would she be able to look on him with the same tenderness in 25 years? Would they be alive? Was love a possibility? Her stomach burned at the thought. She didn't even know what he looked like. He could be horrendous, for all she knew. A regular troll. She doubted it. Besides, that didn't matter anyway. Food mattered. Safety. Kindness. Affection rather than rage. In Vittoria's world, frustrated husbands often committed violence. She would not be a beaten wife like so many others. Mateo, she felt, would not be like that. But did she know that? Vittoria crooned a soft word to Aniko when he stirred. He settled back against her, his face tucked into a fold of her skirt. Her heart cracked at the thought of not seeing him every day. Could she endure the pain of him growing and changing and learning without her? Mare returned. Sonara sent a message with the boy. Said she'd try to visit in a few days. She included some more medicine for Père. No idea where she is? Mare shook her head. Vittoria pushed aside a pang of worry for Sonara. She was so secretive, but helped supply food or medicine or something for Aniko. Père had 2 new bottles of medicine. Several leftover pitas were hidden up high. Where she received such treasures, Vittoria had no idea. At least, she didn't want to know. Givers bless her, Mare said with a tisk. They fell back into silence. In her mind, Vittoria replayed the conversation with Mateo for a 4th time. Why did he believe in her, a lavanda maid? Could he see something in her that she didn't see in herself? He said he would teach you reading, Mare asked. Her jaw was tight, her hands folded in front of her. And magic. Mare hummed a reply. I've hated myself for not teaching you. Her voice was thick with emotion. I can read, know my letters, but it seemed too frightening to give them to you, too great a risk. If we were caught, you could be piked. Vittoria squeezed Mare's arm with a comforting touch. I never wanted you to, Mare. The risk was too great. I don't blame you. Mare's sparkling eyes turned to face her. Would we ever see you again? I would demand it. How would he keep you safe? I'm not sure, Mare. Magic, probably. You must learn it, too. Mare poked her arm with a sniffle. Though you don't care for it, you must try. Can you imagine the safety you could give yourself? Invisibility, transportation. You could see us whenever you wanted. See Aniko whenever you wanted. Mare threw her hands in the air and quieted her exclamation. Père had fallen back into a restless sleep. Vittoria watched him with a wary eye. He breathed so shallowly tonight, his ribs barely moving under his too loose linen shirt. Perhaps the workers will follow Mateo. Perhaps they will see a protector in him already, and everything will be fine. Perhaps. And I would live in a castle, even if it were just a cage, knowing you were fed and cared for, that you had a home. It's all I could ever ask. I would go to the grave in peace at the end of my life. Mare lifted her hands. We have a home. Home is where the witches you love are, Vittoria, not things. Vittoria glanced around the almost empty room and silently disagreed. Dirt floors, scratched walls with a single window that faced an alley, rats scurrying around at night. Aniko slept on a mat not far from the hearth, Père on a straw mattress, Mare and Vittoria in hammocks suspended from the ceiling. They tucked the beds up during the day and pulled them down to sleep. This was a hovel, not a home. Outside, the street lay quiet and dark. A nearby torch had burned out and smoked gently. Her thoughts drifted just like the ash falling from the burnt wood. Maybe home was with the witches you loved, but the security of food and a good neighborhood was important too. They did have a home, but though quiet for the most part, it still wasn't safe. Wouldn't be safe if things spiraled into civil war. She shuddered as she imagined flames licking up the walls, consuming the house. So many rebel riots had ended with the destruction of the buildings that housed rebels or workers. Why not here? Her gaze dropped to Aniko. He stirred when she ran the backs of her knuckles against his cheek. The sharp shadows of night did nothing to hide his gauntness. His thin fingers twitched. Beneath the old shirt lay ribs, easily countable. If she accepted Mateo's offer, he'd give them all food, medicine, a home, a real home, not a hovel. Aniko would have dimples in his elbows like landowner children, and so much energy to run. If she said no, she'd remain here. She'd work as a lavanda maid while the days passed. Every day she would wonder if she made a mistake as the same sun traveled through the same sky while they did the same work. Day after day after day. This endless cycle, did it never change? Would this be what Aniko and his children and their children knew? Vittoria stared at the shadows on the wall. Her mind unraveled, the tangled web suddenly unsupported. Her thoughts fell. They lay in gossamer strands at her feet, as if they'd lost all power. Her resistance crumbled like stone on a dying wall. All arguments faded into the background of her insecurity and doubt. Of course she would be Mateo's High Priestess, provide for her family, change her network, for her family, for Aniko, for every desperate witch. She shook her head with a humorless laugh. A lavanda maid among the nobility, a High Priestess. The absurdity. The sleepless night passed in vague shadows and waking dreams. Just before dawn, Vittoria wrapped herself in her shawl and slipped outside. She tilted her head back to stare at a changing sky that bled from inky black to a bruised gray. A chill crept in from all angles, but she didn't move because she knew he would come. He arrived minutes later. "You must be cold." One moment she was alone, the next he stood at her side. The warmth of a heavy cloak covered her shoulders, its hem so long it rested on the ground. His smell, sand and salt, was reassurance without words, embrace without touch. "I'll do it." The declaration flew out of her all at once. Mateo paused, little more than a shadow next to her. The sun easing into the sky offered enough light that she could just make out dark, disheveled hair. This version of him towered hands above her. She tilted her head back to see into his eyes. His broad shoulders would span the widest barrel. His hand brushed her face, the whisper of his fingertips against her cheek. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "What has convinced you?" "My family." She tilted her head toward the window. "Aniko, if I can provide a new home, safety, food, I must." His hand dropped away. She swayed toward it for half a second, wanting to call back its warmth. The growing light revealed a little more. Full lips, dark eyes, thick lashes, hair as black as the night dropped to his shoulders. A handsome profile, at the very least. Mateo lifted a hand to his face and scrubbed the fatigue from his eyes. "Then we must act immediately to announce it." His expression darkened. "I have never done these before. No one has ever done these before. I can't tell you what to expect. The landowners may be harsh, cutting, cold. The rebels may try to attack. All of them may threaten you, but I will always keep you safe." "No member of the nobility has ever handfasted a lavanda maid, you mean?" she quipped with a smirk. He grinned. "Not in the Castaneda line." Vittoria sucked in a full breath, amusement gone. "I have one condition." "Anything." "Reveal yourself to me without magic." His hands spread out to his sides. "As you see me now." As if the sun had conspired with him, the first beams of full light broke over the eastern sky and illuminated the world. She studied his deep bronze skin and endless eyes, shadowed by heavy lashes. His gaze was soft, but his muscles and features were hardened like a chisel. His confident stance and the regal bearing of authority in his unwavering gaze was an otherworldly strength. It spoke of more than physical prowess. Her hand reached out to touch his chest, as if to affirm that he was real. Her fingers trembled against his shirt for only a moment before she pulled her hand back. Heat burned on her fingertips. For some reason, it felt real. He stood before her as the protector she'd always wanted, the one who had lived in her dreams. He was also far more handsome than she'd ever anticipated. He swept her breath away with his intensely concerned gaze. "Mateo." Mateo was more warrior than vigilante. She wanted to laugh. This snivelly, rat-like creatures he'd occasionally disguised himself as had hidden all this? Deep magic, indeed. "Thank you," he said softly, and so much lingered in the words. "Thank you for your trust. I must go now. There is much to prepare. We must move quickly. Benat, my friend and protector, will come soon. He'll transport you to my house where you'll be safe. Shortly after that, more witches will come to take your family to safety." "How quickly?" she asked, breathless as he took a step back. She didn't want him to go. Oddly, she wanted to follow him right then, to throw herself into the path of her future. But she didn't, because there was still Eniko, her family. The space between them gave her opportunity to breathe. A bucket appeared in his hand, overflowing with food. He extended it to her, as serious as ever. "For your family. Your pair's medicine is inside, enough for a week. We announce our betrothal tonight." He winked. "Don't fear, Vittoria, for I am always at your side. We go into this new life together."